A few years back, Valve made a documentary for the 25th anniversary of the first Half-Life game. It's a very good documentary, and I recommend checking it out in full because it has lots of salient points to make. But one thing that stood out to me was a short snippet during an interview with Gabe Newell, where the founder talks about how one of the goals of Half-Life was that the world should react to the player. I attribute this attention to detail as one of the reasons why the world feels so real, despite being aggressively unrealistic in many other ways. This, of course, extends to the physics-powered sequel, Half-Life 2, and other Source games as well, but I'll play the short clip for you here.
And so we had to come up with some notion of what fun was. We knew it was an ad hoc definition, and it was the degrees to which the game recognizes and responded to the player's choices and actions, right? You know, in behavioral science, you would say we were explicitly talking about what were reinforcers and what the reinforcement schedules were, right? At that point in time, that was a useful way of making design decisions. The point I would make is, if I go up to a wall and shoot it, to me, it feels like the wall is ignoring me. I'm getting a narcissistic injury when the world is ignoring me. So it is to me, I was trying to convey to the user a sense of, yes, you were making choices, yes, you were progressing, which meant the game had to acknowledge that back to you. If you shoot at a wall, there have to be decals. If you kill a bunch of Marines, the Marines have to run away from you, right? You have to have this sense of the game acknowledging and responding to the choices and actions and progressions that you've made. Otherwise, it loses any sort of impact.
The assertion that if the player interacts with the world must give them an answer in return or risk disrespecting the player's presence therein was like, just absolute mind-blown moment. So after that, when returning to working on my game, where the world had nothing to say of my interactions, I sought to fix that. And the key to fixing that was this useful little feature Unreal has tucked away called physics materials. Contrary to what it sounds like, a physics material isn't really a material. It's actually a data type, which traditionally controls things like friction and other physical interactions. It's also often referred to as a physical material, but I'm going to use the word physics material because I've always called it that, but when I say that I mean the same thing. There's a useful technique I picked up from a PrismaticaDev tutorial that allows me to harness this to power this responsive world design. Also, quick aside, if you haven't seen Charlie's videos, I highly recommend them. They're extremely useful for understanding Niagara, material editing, and other fundamental Unreal technologies. Super funny, super informative, and best yet, very short. So, go check that out. Basically, one of the workhorses of anything in Unreal is the hit result. A hit result is something that happens when two things touch or overlap. It tells you things like what it hit, where it hit, at what angle it hit it, and how far it traveled. One piece of information a hit result can return to you is the physics material. Normally, that wouldn't be particularly useful, unless you were using values from the default physics material for one reason or another. So what I did was subclass the physics material as a custom blueprint class and added my own shit to it. You see, what I could do, and might be some people's first instinct, is to embed the material information in the object that gets hit. So if you have a wall mesh or a crate that's made of metal, have it contain a tag or a variable that says metal, and then use that to select from some predetermined array of sounds and particle effects relevant to the surface it hits. That isn't an incorrect way to approach this. That's perfectly valid. But I wanted something a little more plug and play, where I could extend it later at very little development cost. So, using that custom blueprint class I created, I just gave it a bunch of variables for particle effects, decals, sound effects, and other relevant different types of data for different types of attacks, such as bullet or explosive. Then, when an attack hits that surface, instead of the attack having a ton of assets associated with it that it has to load into memory, it just asks the physics material what it needs to do, and the physics material gives it the relevant asset. So, when I shoot the ground, it shoots out a line called a trace that intersects with the ground at a location. Once it knows it hit something, it gets the physics material associated with that surface and asks it, what do I do now? Then the physics material says, well, you just hit me with a bullet, so you're going to use a bullet hole decal, and you're going to make a metal twang noise, and you're going to play this particle effect with some sparks. And thus, it does that. But this is where the extendability of the system comes into play. So if I shoot this concrete surface, the same trace takes place, and all it does is ask what you're made of and tell me what to do. So in this case, the physics material for concrete says, well, I'm concrete, so you're going to use this type of decal and particle effect and sound. And this is true for every surface in the game. And the only thing I have to do to apply this is in the parent material of any given surface, assign the physics material. So all these concrete materials in this folder actually draw from the same single material, called a parent material, which itself is the child of another parent, and so on up the chain until you reach the master material for all environmental surfaces. But all I have to do is set this concrete parent material to use the concrete physics material, and all of its children will follow. Now, besides tickling my brain because it's neat, there are some distinct benefits to this approach. It makes finding, changing, or fixing anything related to the physics responses from surfaces much easier, because all of them are in one place. Related is how all the things tied to that surface can be embedded. For example, the footsteps the player or another enemy emits on a given surface, or the way that it reacts to different types of damage. And of course, it's a very simple calculation. I don't have to find out what kind of actor it is, I don't have to troll through its tags, I just have an interface that returns the relevant information for different kinds of reactions, and every time a projectile hits it, it just asks. If it doesn't get anything, it doesn't get anything. And if it does, then it knows what it needs to do. It's very plug and play, as stated by the goal at the beginning. All I have to do is set them up, which is now done, and then as I make materials for anything, I assign them. If I make a new metal prop, I assign the metal physics material. If I make a new human character, I assign the human flesh material. And if I decide to make a new physics material for a surface I haven't thought of yet, I can just make a new physics material blueprint and assign it as I go. There's no need to go back into the code for the attack or add anything extra, risk forgetting places where things need to be for effects or sound effects. It's almost like the system always asks, but assumes nothing, which as I understand it is not only more efficient, but also much easier to manage as a developer. And I have to say, it really does make the world feel tangible. While part of that, I'm sure, is the very well-designed source engine sound effects I'm using temporarily, I think a good part of it is the way that it fulfills the expectations we have as humans. Lots of games don't have this level of surface interaction. And like many other things, we can easily suspend our disbelief. But it's still a suspension. So filling in that suspension with something seemingly real brings that world to life. And ultimately, that's what we're trying to do here, right? Thank you for indulging me on this rabbit hole I found myself going down. Was it a massive waste of time for a fast-paced arena shooter? I guess we'll find out, but I enjoyed it, and if nothing else, for the handful of overly observant players, I'm sure they'll appreciate it as well. If you like this kind of thing, be sure to subscribe. I have lots of videos lined up in a similar vein, exploring different and interesting techniques and technologies I'm using in development of my game, Altfire. Thank you very much for watching, and until next time, take care.